In today's video, we're going to talk about strength curves. What are they, why they're important, and how you're going to train differently after you watch this video. Hey guys, Fahad here from Fit with Fahad, and as you know, I like to simplify science for people just like you who want to train without having to go to university and getting a degree to train effectively and properly, okay? And in today's video, we're going to touch on a subject that sounds a little bit complicated. It actually is a complicated subject, but I want to break it down to you so that you understand the basics of what we call strength curves and resistance profiles, what they are and why they're important, and how you're going to train differently after you watch this video. So stick around to the end because I'm going to ask you a question now, and at any time in the video you get the answer, pop a comment below with the time you got it, and watch at the end of the video when I'll reveal the answer to you. But the question is, why are dumbbell flies not an effective exercise for building the chest? Okay, I'll say that again. Why are dumbbell flies not the most effective exercise for building a good chest? Okay, so that being said, before we even get into what strength curves are and what resistance profiles are, why they matter, we have to have a basic understanding of anatomy. Now this video could be a very, very long video that breaks everything down into the minute details. But I want to keep this as basic as possible so you get a basic understanding. Now, if you would like me to create a longer series of videos explaining each and everything that I'm talking about in detail so that you understand it, then drop a comment below. Let me know if this is something you want to see, and then I'll go ahead and I'll break down each of the concepts that I'm going to discuss in this video and elaborate on it so you get a better and deeper understanding of what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's go back to anatomy. Now, one thing we have to understand is your body is made up of different things that comprise of anatomy. And the two most important things when we're looking at physique and the structure of your body and the way your body looks are your muscle cells, or your muscle, or your skeletal muscle, and the skeleton itself. When it comes to training, we want to focus on muscles and bones. Okay, the reason we want to focus on muscles and bones is because we're going to work the muscles out during exercise, and muscles have an effect on bones. Now we can break it down a little bit further and look at joints and ligaments, etc. But we will touch on joints because that's an important aspect of the whole idea of strength curves and resistance profiles and training effectively. So you have different types of muscle. You have skeletal muscle, which is what we're going to discuss today, which is the type of muscle that attaches the skeleton to move you about. You have other types of muscle as well, like your heart is a muscle, but it's not attached to the bones to move the skeleton. It has its own primary function, which is obvious. It distributes and pumps blood, oxygenated blood throughout the body so you can live. Okay, but we're talking about skeletal muscle here. Now, skeletal muscle is quite a complicated animal in itself, the way it's comprised. We don't want to get into too much detail about how skeletal muscle is comprised. What we do need to understand is that muscle has something called attachment points. Okay, now what attachment points are? They are where the muscles attach to the body. Usually it attaches to skeleton and bone, but sometimes it will attach to other things like processes, which I don't want to go into. Anyway, you have what we call origin points and insertion points. Now the basic way to understand this is the origin is the closest part to the middle part of the body, and the insertion point is the part which the muscle attaches to, which causes the actual movement of the skeleton. So for example, if I look at my chest here, now my chest does this movement here, yeah? If you put your hand on your chest and you do this movement, you should feel the muscles contracting, okay? Now, the muscles of my chest originate in this part of my body. So we've got three different parts of the chest. We've got the upper pecs, which sort of like originate in what we call the clavicular region here, or the clavicle. Okay, we've got the middle head of part of the pec, which starts off here in the sternum and into the upper manubrium here, and then we've got the lower pec here, which originates in rib. Now they all insert into this arm because the arm is what's moving. So if you feel your chest, if you've got a developed chest, you can feel this. But if you run your hand across your chest and you feel sort of like the muscle, you can almost feel the tendon in which it connects to into your arm, into your humerus. So, that being said, once you understand where the muscles start, what bone they move on, what bone they move, or what bone they affect, the third thing you need to understand is what is the joint that is being affected by the muscle. Now, in the case of the pecs and the arm moving, the joint here, okay, it's the shoulder joint or the glenohumeral joint. So the glenohumeral joint or the shoulder joint is the joint that is being moved when this muscle contracts and when it relaxes. Okay, it sounds a bit complicated, but bear with me. Now, without getting too into the science of training and execution of exercises, what we need to look at next is the strength curve of a muscle. So what a strength curve is basically it's like a curve, like a bell curve, and you see a diagram here. You'll have the muscle starting off as weak, and it goes to strong, and it drops off as weak again. So in its fully lengthened position, the muscle is weak. In its fully shortened position and its fully contracted position, the muscle is weak. In the mid-range, it's strong. So for example, if I take my bicep, this is the lengthened, fully lengthened position here of the bicep. Okay. Now, why am I putting my hand all the way back? Is because the bicep, we spoke about origins and insertion points. The bicep actually originates in the scapula. So there's fully lengthened range, I have to pull it back a little bit, okay? If I start moving it here, it's still lengthened, but it's not fully lengthened, which is here. So let's say from this position it's weak. Okay, as I move the arm up here, okay, as I move the arm into a flex position here, from this position onwards, I'm getting into a stronger position. So from here, it's a strong position, okay? Now, remember I said the bicep connects at the scapula. The bicep also contributes to a small amount of shoulder flexion. So you can actually bring your arm up and it's still the bicep doing a little bit of this work. In this position, my bicep's starting to get weak again, okay? So if I put resistance on my hand at this point, it's weak. If I get into this position, flex, it's stronger. And if I get up here, it's weak again. The bicep goes weak. So once you understand that, you understand the strength curve of a muscle, we now have to look at the resistance profile of the exercise. This is where physics plays a role. So now we're going to go to basic GCSE physics. And when I was at school and I was doing GCSE physics, I completely switched off. I'll be honest with you, I love chemistry, I love biology, but physics, I just didn't see the practical application in my life. Moment arms, levers, fulcrums, pivot points, all of that, just didn't see the point of it until I became a personal trainer, and then I realized how important physics is to helping a client get the best out of their training, so they're training the safest way possible and the most effective way possible. So what we're going to look at now are moment arms, levers, and effort and load. Okay, once you understand this, then you'll find it easier to understand the importance of strength curves, the importance of resistance profiles, and how you're going to train more effectively going forward. And remember, if you've figured out why dumbbell flies are not the best exercise to do for pec development, pop a comment below and let me know exactly when the penny drops for you. So in this example, what you're going to see is you're going to see me doing a chest press. Now, when I get to this lowered position of the chest press, my pec muscle is in what we call a lengthened position. And if you look at my elbow joint is far away from my shoulder joint. Now remember, we said that with pec exercises, the main joint moving is your shoulder joint. Now this is a multi-joint exercise because your elbow joint is also moving. And there's some movement in the scapula as well. So we want to lock the scapula in place so we limit the movement of the scapula. We want to try and minimize the amount of effort put into the elbow by keeping it at a 90-degree angle. We don't want the triceps to get engaged too much because we want to focus on the pec. So when I'm in this lower position here, as you can see, my elbow is far away from my shoulder joint. When I bring it up, my elbow joint and my shoulder joint are almost in the same line. Now, why is this important? Well, this is where moment arms play an important role. So let me explain to you now what moment arm is. So moment arm, in the strictest sense of the word, in the definition, is the distance, the perpendicular distance between the load and the fulcrum, or the pivot point. So for example, imagine this line represents a line of force. So if I'm holding a weight in front of my hand here, that's the gravitational pull of the force. So that's where the load is going down in that direction. If I hold the same force here, it's going further away. So let's say that my shoulder is the pivot point in this example. If I draw a line straight out of my shoulder, that perpendicular 90-degree line would be where that band is now. So from here, where my arm is coming in, and where it intersects this imaginary line coming forward from my shoulder, that's 90 degrees. So this arm now, this full arm here represents the moment arm, i.e. the distance between the load and the pivot point, i.e. my shoulder joint. Now, if I bring my arm in this direction here, as you can still see the band, the red line going down, okay? But if imagine there's a line now coming from my shoulder joint in front, the cross section is now here. So the distance between this line and the imaginary line coming out of my shoulder joint is shorter than it was here. So the moment arm is longer here, and the distance of the moment arm is shorter here. What that means is the torque, which is the load that is applied to the actual fulcrum or the pivot point. So any rotational joint, the force applied to that rotational joint is called torque. The torque applied to the shoulder in this position is greater than the torque applied to the shoulder in this position, meaning there's more force going into that joint in this position because of the angle of the joint and the length of the moment arm than there is in this position, because the length of the moment arm is shorter, meaning there's less torque delivered to the shoulder joint. And when we look at a chest press, a traditional chest press which starts here and goes here, you're going from a greater length of moment arm, if you see it here, into an almost zero moment arm as we go here. So the torque reduces as you go up. Okay, so that is what a moment arm is and what torque is, and that's why it's going to be important to understand this when we understand an exercise. Now, remember we said about the strength curve, your muscle goes from weak to strong to weak. So when you're in this weak position of the muscle, the torque being supplied by the dumbbell is at its heaviest. And as you get stronger, the torque drops off. So can you see the relationship is inverse here? The torque is going down, but the strength is going up. So what we need to do is we need to manipulate the exercise to create more tension as you get stronger and drop off the tension as you get weaker. And that's what we're going to look at in this next clip. So what I'm doing in this example is I'm doing a chest press using the Smith machine, and I'm using something here. I'm using resistance bands. Now, the reason I'm using resistance bands is resistance bands are a great way to manipulate the torque of the exercise. You can manipulate the resistance profile of the exercise to match the strength profile and the strength curve of the muscle. So by attaching resistance bands to the top like this, what I can do is now, as the bar approaches my chest to the end of the active range of motion, my muscle is at a weaker point, but the moment arm is at this longest point in the range of motion of the exercise. The bands have now acted as giving a little bit of resistance here. So they've taken a little bit of that load off while I'm in the weaker position. And as I push up into that shortened position, the tension from the bands eases up, so the torque goes up. So now I've got, rather than having that inverse relationship with the dumbbells, I've got now a positive relationship that matches the strength curve and the resistance profile. And now what that means is I can train the fibers of the muscles in the full range of motion of that exercise equally, or at least more effectively, and I can do that without putting a lot of pressure on my joint. Because if I'm going in the low position with heavier weight, at this position, because my muscle is at its weakest point, and if I start upping the load, I'm going to put a lot of torque on the actual joint here, and it's going to compromise that joint. And in this position, the shoulder joint is weak, especially if you're doing bro stuff and you're going all the way down and your shoulder joint is even weaker at this point. You're gonna create injuries in your joints. Now, we've seen that. I get so many clients come in through the doors who have been doing bro style of training, and they've got shoulder injuries. They've got pain in their shoulders when they do bench presses or chest exercises because they've got issues in their AC joints because of the way they've been training. So this is why it's so important to understand this concept, so you can train safer and you can train more effectively. Now, the kind of people that watch my videos are usually people in their mid-30s to mid-40s. Now, if you're in that age bracket like you are, like I am, what's going to happen is you're probably going to need to take your joint health more seriously than somebody who's in their late teens to early 20s who's starting out training. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody younger should just ignore this science and compromise their joint health for the sake of, ego lifting. Not at all. If you are younger watching this, then you're going to learn a skill here that is so important. It's going to maximize your gains in the gym. But when you do reach my age, you're going to have decent joints and you're not going to be in pain. And you know what? There are a lot of people out there that poo-poo on form, and they say that, the form police and the moment arm brigade, etc. But let's be honest now. Would you rather train effectively and safely so that when you're older you don't have joint pains like a lot of bodybuilders do? Or would you rather just put that all out the window, train how you want to train, and then when you're older you've got issues? Let's be honest now, nobody wants issues when they're older. Okay? So that's why this is so important. Okay guys, so let's go back to that initial question. Why is the dumbbell fly not as good an exercise to build the pecs? Well, the answer is, when you go into this fly position here, we've already said the moment arm is dependent on how far the weight is, the load is, the line from the load is perpendicular to the angle of the joint. Well, as you do a chest fly, you've increased the load at your weaker position. So when you're pushing up from this position, putting far more torque in your shoulder joint, which is already in a compromised position because the muscle is weak, you're putting far more strain into the joint, more potential for joint damage. That's not to say you should never do flies. You can potentially do flies if you manipulate the resistance profile of the exercise, or you have a spotter there to give you that extra lift in the weaker position. So there you have it. That's why strength curves are important. That's why resistance profiles are important. Now you know. I hope your training is a little bit smarter as a result, and you don't make the mistakes most people do when they start training. If you'd like to see me explain this in more detail, if you'd like to see me give more examples or really break this video down, pop a comment below. I'm more than happy to make a video for you, or a series of videos that'll explain it in more detail. And if you like this video, if you got value from it, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification. I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day, sweat more, suck less, and stay awesome. And guys, if you like this video, you're going to love this video here. You'll like this playlist here. But don't forget, always subscribe.